So, welcome back to my channel. And today I have come back with another topic of environmental economics, that is the relationship between pollution, land price, and wage. So, actually, we see that from the revealed preference approach, we see that the property values that differ according to the environmental quality of any specific place. Sometimes we see that the higher environmental quality, the property value will be high. And sometimes we find that's just the opposite, that we find that the urban area which are mostly polluted, the property value is high. Compared to this, if you look at the rural area which are less polluted, their property value is low. So what we see here, that urban area, that means high pollution, that indicates higher property value. Similarly, if we see the rural area which are less polluted, that are subject to lower property value. So what we see here, according to the environmental quality, there is the differential in the land prices. Similarly, if we look at the wage, so in urban area, we see the high wage, and in the rural area, we see low wage. So urban area is, the level of pollution is always higher in the urban area compared to the rural area. So urban area offers higher wage. So why? Is it a premium for facing higher pollution, the risk of higher pollution? So whatever it is, we find that there is a wage differential from rural to urban area. So there is the differential. We will use here these two types of differentials. So one is the wage differential and another is the land price differential. So our concern is to find the value of pollution, or in other ways, the value of environmental quality, comparing the wage differential and the land price differential, or the property value differential. So here what we see here, that the impact of pollution. So impact of pollution on the wage rate and the impact of the pollution on land price. So we use this for a valuation to find out how does the pollution affect the wage rate and land prices. So from this, by using this analysis, we will try to find out the valuation of pollution with the help of wage differential and the land price differential. So here we will take the help of a model. So for the model we will take some assumptions. So in assumptions of our simple model of wage, land price and pollution, we will consider different areas. So different area, it may be city, and different pollution level. Okay, so different area, so area wise the pollution level differs. Number two, second assumption is that the markets are perfectly competitive. So both the commodity market, factor market and land market, the commodity market, labor market and land market, all are perfectly competitive. So we can consider that So here, third thing is that according to the different areas are subject to different wage. Remember that here we wage mean mainly the annual wage. So how much the workers will earn over within a year. So we are not considering here the monthly wage, daily wage or hour based wage. So here wage mainly represents the annual income of the consumer. So wage may differ from one place to another. But remember that the workers are mobile, wage differs from one place to another, but workers here, they will mainly make their decision regarding migration on the basis of their utility. Because here, only wage does not matter, the level of pollution and land price, all these, level of pollution and the quality of land or the land price, all these things will influence his utility function. So what we see here, that instead of considering wage differential, the labor are mobile, workers are mobile, the workers will move from one place to another if that ensures higher level of utility. So that means wage that may differ here. Number 4, whenever we are considering the producers will try to find out the place at which the cost is minimum, because this is a perfectly competitive market and price is constant. So producers will always try to find out the place at which they can minimize their cost of production. So producers, their objective is to minimize cost. And so what we see here, the consumers, third assumption, consumers, they want to maximize their utility. Now, what we see here, we'll consider here consumers utility function. If we see, the utility will depend upon two things. So X stands for marketed commodity. Better to say this stands for a composite basket of marketed commodities. And L stands for the land at which they stay. So this is the utility function of the worker. So what we see here, these are our assumptions. Now we'll consider more thing, the three possibilities that the pollution. One thing is that pollution, this is counterproductive. So whenever there is pollution and government imposes some corrective taxation on it, so higher level of pollution means the cost will increase. So what we see here, the pollution increases, that will have a direct effect on the cost. Second thing, the pollution, it is productive. That means any pollution activities of the farm remains unnoticed by the state, and state does not impose any kind of punitive tax or any kind of restriction on it. So that means higher pollution, that will reduce the cost of production. And third possibility is that pollution has no effect on cost. So these are the three possibilities, and considering three possibilities, we will find out the impact of pollution on the land price as well as the wage rate. So if we start from the consumer's perspective, the consumer, he earns W is the income of the consumer. We consider it wage income. So we consider it as an annual wage. So in 1 year, how much the individual or worker earns. So he will spend his income on two things. Number 1, the land, and number 2, the composite good. And I have already assumed that the composite good is a numeraire. So Px will be considered as 1. So if we see that R is the land price and X is the amount of composite good consumed, L is the volume of land that the consumer purchases or the individual worker purchases. So we can write W equals to X plus R into L. This is the budget equation of the consumer. And given this budget, the consumer has to maximize U, which is a function of X and L. So this is the utility function. So like the other consumers, here the consumer's objective is to maximize his utility. And we can write here that marginal utility of X, that is positive, and marginal utility of land is also positive. So starting from this situation, but we are not here mainly trying to find out the volume of X or L. Our main objective is to find out to examine the effect of change in pollution level on wage rate and the land price. So that's why we will convert this utility function into an indirect utility function. So our indirect utility function will be given as V, which is a function of W, R and P. So P is a specific pollution level of the area at which the worker is living. R is the land price and W is the wage rate. So from this equation it is clear that VP, so we can write here that del V del W is greater than 0. That means other things remaining constant, if the wage rate increases, if the income increases, consumers will be better off. Second thing, del V by del R, that is less than 0. So it is quite clear that given the other things remaining constant, that means income constant, pollution level constant, so if the rent of land or the land price increases, the individual will be worse off. And finally, we can write that del V, del P, this is also less than 0. So given the income and the wage rate, given the annual wage or wage rate, what is the income? Given the land price, if there is higher pollution level, the consumer will be worse off. So given this, if we consider a given level of pollution, here we can find the indifference curve of the consumer. So this indifference curve will be given as, in horizontal axis we are measuring the wage rate, in vertical axis we are measuring the land price. So this time indifference curve will be positively sloped. So we have to remember one thing here, why I am showing the upward rising indifference curve. Normally the indifference curves are downward sloping. But we have to remember that whenever we draw the downward sloping indifference curve, so what we see, that this is from a well-behaved utility function. So this is from normally what we see here, U is a function of U, X, Y. So two commodities, X and Y. So what we see here, that MUX is greater than 0 and MUY is greater than 0. And both marginal utilities are negative. So that's why their marginal rate of substitution is negative. That means if we want to increase the consumption of one commodity and so that our utility level should remain unchanged, that means we have to sacrifice the consumption of the other commodity. But here what we see, in this equation, in this indirect utility function, that this is the utility is inversely related to R and directly related to W. So whenever there is an increase in the land R or the land price, that means that will have negative effect on the consumer. for the compensation, what we see, the wage rate should increase. So that's why we have a direct relationship between W and R here, because the utility, indirect utility function, utility is directly related to W but inversely related to R. So that's why we'll have a upward rising indifference curve. So, or you can say it is an iso utility curve. So anything you can say. So this is the individual indifference curve of the individual. All the points indicate. So we can write here V, W, R, P1. So if we see the another level of utility, another area in which the pollution level is high. So what we have to do? So if we consider, just I am giving one example, the W0 and R0. Now the pollution level rises. So if the pollution level rises, another pollution level in different area. So what we see? That if the utility are not same in both areas, then the people will migrate from that area from area 2 to area 1. So what we see here? Either, so we will have the indifference curve, rightward shift of the indifference curve. That means what? Given the range, given the land price, either the wage rate should be high, or given the wage rate, the land price should be low. Or we can see both should decline. So, sorry, both should happen simultaneously. So, whenever we move from here to here, what we see here? The wage rate rises but land price declines. So, this is how to compensate the pollution. Either, there are three different ways to compensate the pollution. First thing is that given the land price, wage rate should be more. Number two, given the wage rate, land price should be less. Or there should be a simultaneous decline in wage rate, decline in land price, as well as a rise in the rent, or the decline in rent price and the increase in wage simultaneously. These two things should happen to maintain the level of utility. Otherwise, the people from area 2 will start to migrate to area 1. Now, we think from the perspective of the producers. The producers will always go to the area in which the cost is minimum. So let's start with the thing that number one case, the pollution. But before coming to the pollution, productive or counterproductive, just let us think about the producer's isocost curve. So what do we see here? Cost function. First thing to remember that here, that this is a perfectly competitive market. So whenever we are considering the perfect competition, then the P should be equal to MC. And here we have already considered that P equals to 1. So our MC should always be equal to 1. Now, what are the determinants of MC? So MC definitely will be determined by C, function of W, function of R, and function of the level of pollution. So if the pollution is productive, P rises, C will marginal cost will fall. If the pollution is counterproductive, P rises, marginal cost will increase. And if the cost is indifferent to the pollution, then what we see, no matter what is the level of P, C will remain unchanged. So pollution rises or pollution falls, there will be no change in the cost of marginal cost. So by this equation, what we can draw an isocost line. So if we in horizontal axis we are measuring the wage rate, and the vertical axis we are measuring the land price. So what we see here, that the competitive zero profit condition, or MC equals to 1. So if we study the famous Stolpa-Samuelson theorem or a Heckscher-Ohlin model, what we see, that whenever the wage rate, the one the factor price rises, the other factor price should fall to maintain the cost. So what we'll see here, the iso cost line will be downward sloping. So not iso cost line, better not to use the term iso cost line. This is the iso cost curve. So every point of this curve indicates the same marginal cost. So what we see here, there is an inverse relationship between these two. So whenever the wage rate rises, the land price should fall, and vice versa. Whenever the land price rises, wage rate should fall. Now, how it is related to pollution? So if we consider that the pollution is productive, so if the pollution is productive, what we see here, that pollution has a negative effect on cost. So in this case, what we see, so in this case, what we see here, either given the rent, the land price, the wage rate should rise, or given the wage rate, land price should rise. So we'll get a rightward shift of the isocost curve. So similarly, if the pollution is counterproductive, this will happen. The curve will shift leftward. And if the pollution has nothing to do with the cost of production, then the curve will remain same. So here what we see, whenever we are considering the determination of wage rate and the land price, we have to introduce the interaction between the farms or the producers and the individuals. So individuals, from the utility maximizing behavior of the individuals, what we see, W by R, there is a direct relationship. And from the cost minimizing behavior of the farms, this is, we can write here that V, which is a function of W, R and P1. This is also, C is a function of W, R and P1. So this is our equilibrium. Let us consider this point A is the equilibrium. So this is R star and this is our W star. Now we are coming to the most important point of this discussion. If there is an increase in the pollution level, so let us consider compare it with another city or another area which is subject to higher pollution. So first we'll start with the case at which the pollution is counterproductive. So we have seen here what will happen to the indifference curve. The indifference curve, with the higher level of pollution, the indifference curve should shift rightward. That means either given the rent, given the land price, workers should be paid higher wage, or given the wage, workers should be charged less land price. Only then the utility will remain same. So this is our V, W, R and P2. Now what will happen to the isocost curve whenever the pollution is counterproductive? So definitely what will happen? So either so if it is counterproductive, what will happen? Either given the wage rate, the land price should fall, or given the land price, the wage rate should fall. So that means what we will find? We will find a leftward shift of this curve. So what will be the equilibrium here? The new equilibrium point will be given as point. The equilibrium will be, so this is our E, W, R, P2. So what we see here, in CT2, the equilibrium will be at point B. So what we see here, the land price falls, wage rate remains same. So if the pollution is counterproductive, we can say that the land price will fall, but wage rate, we cannot say anything concretely about the wage rate because there are also three possibilities. We can show it that in this case what we see, the wage rate remains same. Now, there is also another possibility. This is CWR P1 VWR P1. So in this case, what we see that this is our initial equilibrium A, this is our new equilibrium B. CWR P2, PWR P2. So whenever we move from A to B, what we see that the land price falls but wage rate rises. So that will be determined by the relative shift of these two curves. So here what we see that there is a smaller leftward shift in the isocost curve and larger rightward shift in the consumer's indifference curve. Okay, W and R. So here what we see, the land price falls but the wage rate rises. So opposite case can happen also. The land price can, but the land price will definitely fall. Wage rate, land price will definitely fall. The wage rate can rise, wage rate can fall, and wage rate can remain same depending upon the relative change in these two curves, relative shift of two curves. Now, second case is that, so you can try it at home considering the different three types of different, whenever the shift, this here we see that the shift in the indifference curve is greater than the shift in the isocost curve. So that's why land price falls and the wage rate rises. But whatever the case is that whenever the pollution is counterproductive, the land price will fall, definitely fall. The effect on the wage rate is ambiguous. Now we'll see the case 2, when the pollution that is productive. So if the pollution is productive, again we start from compare between two areas, area 1, area 2. So this is our indifference curve and this is our isocost line. Now what do we see? Here, whenever the pollution is productive, so due to higher pollution, it will go to higher level of pollution, it will shift rightward. And WR P2, and it will also shift rightward. So what we see here, this was our initial equilibrium. And this is our new equilibrium. So in this case, what we can see that the wage rate will definitely rise, but the effect of pollution on the land price is ambiguous. Why it is so? Because whenever the pollution is productive, that will have an upward pressure on the land price, definitely, because we know that the producers, they always want to find out the area in which the cost will be minimum. But simultaneously, whenever we are considering an increase in the pollution level, the workers, to compensate the workers, wage rate should also rise. Now, whenever the wage rate rises and given the cost of production, marginal cost should be equal to 1, wage rate rises, that puts an downward pressure on the land price. So for the productive pollution, there is an upward pressure on the land price. And for rise in wage rate, there will be a downward pressure on the land price. So whether the land price will rise or fall, that will depend upon the relative strength of these two forces. So in this case, what we see that the wage rate will definitely rise, but the effect of pollution on land price is ambiguous here. So land price may rise, land price may fall, or land price may remain the same. So that will depend upon the volume of shift in two curves. So you can practice it at home, considering different situations. And the third possibility is that pollution has no effect on cost. So in this case, what will we see? That the ISO cost curve will not change its position because of pollution, but whatever there is higher pollution, level of pollution, the indifference curve will shift rightward. So what we see here, there will be definitely a rise in the wage rate and the decline in the land price. So in this simple model, we have found the effects on wage rate and land price, the effects of pollution on wage rate and land price, considering the interaction between the farms and the individuals. And we say several different types of results considering different situations. Mainly, we are considering here three possibilities: that pollution is productive, pollution is counterproductive, and third thing is that pollution, the cost of production has nothing to do with the pollution. So what we see here, that whenever the pollution is counterproductive, an increase in pollution level will cause a decline in the land price, but the effect on the wage rate is ambiguous. Second thing is that whenever we are considering that the pollution is productive, it will definitely have a positive effect on the wage rate, but the effect on land price is ambiguous. So that depends upon the relative strength. And third possibility, whenever pollution has no effect on the cost of production, then the higher pollution will cause an increase in wage rate and decline in land price. So this is actually how can we relate the land price and the wage rate with the pollution. So we end here. So if the video seems fruitful for you, please do share and subscribe. And soon I'll be back with a new video. Till then, goodbye.